We have a GoFundMe page to raise funds to help British Muslims find a spouse, and our platform consists of two main projects. Number one, marriage events. These are events designed and structured to assist Muslims find a spouse. And number two, our podcast, which you're listening to right now. As you know, it's called Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance. If you want to donate, please find the link to the GoFundMe page below. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance podcast. My name is Muhammad and I am your host. In this episode, we are joined by brother Mostafa and brother Enigma. Both of these brothers have experienced divorce and they will both tell us their story and they will give their opinions in relation to the marriage search. Brother Mostafa is the CEO of Muslim Marriage Services who sponsored season 1 of this podcast. Muslim Marriage Services help others find meaningful connections in a digitally secure and supportive environment. They have a new secure profile sharing feature coming very soon to enhance user safety and privacy. So do check their website out, www.muslimmarriage.global. Just a warning for everyone, this episode contains sensitive subjects. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters, today's episode we are joined by two brothers from the UK. Actually, one of them currently is in Bangladesh doing this recording with us. Both of them have previously been married. Without further ado, I'm going to go to our first guest, and that is brother Mostafa. Assalamu alaikum, bro. Why don't you give us an introduction?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Haji Mostafa Muhammad Karim. I'm honored to join this podcast. I was born in Bangladesh in 1975. I moved to the UK in 1976, with formative years spent back in Bangladesh from 1982 to 83. I come from a very distinguished and prominent family with deep medical roots. My dad was a scholar, Hafiz, and internationally eminent ophthalmologist, and my mum was an accomplished teacher of Arabic, Quranic studies, and Bangla. My mum and dad set the example of the definitive marriage in our South Asian communities, as they were married from 1948 to 89, and therefore had one of the world's longest marriages. Childhood bereavement shaped my path, leading me away from medicine and spending over a decade at Apple. My dad's vision, pun intended, made us one of the first Mac-based families globally, what I humorously refer to as Immaculate Conception. I studied pharmacology at the University of Liverpool and Islamic philosophy at Cambridge. Inspired by my own experiences as a divorcee, I founded Muslim Marriage Services to create the most secure matrimonial site ever designed, helping others find meaningful connections in a safe and supportive environment. Our trademark-pending Profile Shield technology will soon offer enhanced privacy and safety through security, profile sharing, and guardian approval. I have been blessed to travel to 39 countries, gaining amazing insights into diverse cultures.
Thank you for that introduction. And our second esteemed guest is a brother Enigma. Assalamu alaikum, my friend. Please give us an introduction.
Wa alaikum salam. Okay, cool. I'm 40. I work in the front-end financial services industry. Had a fair bit of experience in terms of like the search, that ultimate question by way of going through marriage events, volunteering, and so on and so forth. I've also done extensive work in terms of in relation to like behavioral work with and coaching and mentoring for people on the side. Again, part of it to help with where I'm trying to end up in terms of, or where I was trying to end up in terms of my search.
Okay, thank you very much, brother Enigma, for that. Okay, so I'll take it back to Mostafa. Mostafa, just before I ask you about your previous marriage, everybody knows you were sponsoring season 1 of this podcast. What is the reason that you started MMS?
It's a great question, brother. A lot of reasons. Mainly because I was twice divorced at the time, and something had to be done, mainly for myself to find a suitable partner, because no one's going to help me after a divorce. Nobody wants to know, nobody wants to help. And also, a lot of our brothers and sisters were not married. Well, a lot of them were divorced as well. And nothing was being done by the mosques, by the communities. Something had to be done. And that is the reason why MMS was started as the world's only certified social enterprise Muslim matrimonial site. And it's been a work in progress, and it still continues to be so. And it's something that required a lot of vision. And it's not about giving up, it's about never-ending progress.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, if anyone's interested in using MMS, aka Muslim Marriage Services, they can turn to season 1 of our podcast and it gives you all the details there. Okay, so Mostafa, let's go to your previous or your latest marriage that you were involved in. How did you come across your ex-partner?
Well, I think we have to give a bit of context for the first marriage. So that starts the whole procedure. So long story short, our old friends advised us to go to Bangladesh. This was in 2002, to find a Defi girl, as that would be the best thing for us, as we're a very traditional family. So I was married in 2002, 2007, and 2021 online.
Okay. And how long ago was your divorce?
The most recent one was November 2022 online.
How long were you married for?
About 14 months.
All right, let me take it to Brother Enigma. The same questions to you. Starting off with, how did you come across your ex-spouse?
Well, I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I walked up to her in a health club.
Oh, right. And how long ago was your divorce?
This would have been pretty much over 10 years ago, and the marriage lasted for just under a year.
Right. Okay, so I'll take it back to Brother Mostafa. Focusing now on your divorce story, and I appreciate you said that you've previously been married altogether 3 times. So again, it's a matter for you as to how you answer this and which story you want to make reference to. If 1, if 2, if 3, no problem. But I'll still pose a question to you, and that is, I want you to tell us about your divorce story or divorce stories and tell us what happened.
Well, the first marriage was to a Dhaka girl, and it was an absolute disaster from the start. The girl was very abusive and scheming. She started shouting at my mum and I when she got to Britain, and she almost broke my arm once and even started throwing things at me in front of mum. She ultimately got the indefinite leave to remain in 2004, as I had to apply for that, as that was the law then. Never did I think I would become a victim of domestic violence, and it's not something that even most of my closest friends know about. Divorce 2 was in 2011, just before my Hajj. The girl just left the house one evening without warning. We called the police about my wife, so they came to search, as this was standard procedure. The police contacted me and requested me to return my wife's belongings and passport. I went with my Abby, and as I felt uncomfortable being alone with the police. Divorce 3, my mum was asking some well-known Maulanas and Sheikhs if they knew any practicing girls in Britain. One well-known Bangladeshi TV imam mentioned his niece in Bangladesh. She wasn't married and very attractive, although I really didn't want to go to Bangladesh to get married again. My mum discussed my situation with her family, and they were open to a potential marriage. We chatted for about 6 months. Whilst we didn't expect anything in return, they kept demanding items such as wanting British gold and to see saris we bought, which was just insulting. Their family kept saying diamond and platinum is haram, so I replied, well, you obviously haven't read the Quran properly, as gold and silk aren't mentioned as being haram for men. We visited her uncle's home in the East Midlands and got married there online in September 2021. We flew to Bangladesh in December 2021, as the in-person nikah was in January 2022. At the nikah, my wife's family presented me with the cheapest silver ring possible, no sherwani and no wedding hat until nearly to the end of the event. They gave me nominal cash. Now things get increasingly difficult. One day I was looking for my chain, which I always wear. My family were asking where my chain was. My wife claimed not to have seen it, and I said somebody has either stolen it or put it somewhere, meaning we all knew it was my wife. Later on, she said she had found the chain, which we all knew was a lie. The trust was already broken by then. Fast forward 7 months, her family came over to our home on the pretext of an invitation in Liverpool. As they are Sylheti, they know pretty much everyone. What happened next was just horrific. My baby was present when they started complaining why I wasn't doing enough to bring their daughter over. I told them these things take time. One of my friends had to wait 2 years to bring his wife over. They were not happy with this, so they started attacking our family reputation. I really cannot mention what they said. It was so upsetting and vile. I even secretly recorded the argument in case we needed evidence in future. 2 months later in October, I signed a talaq, which I sent by post also. The paper was returned unsigned, although the divorce still counts, as the husband has overriding power in divorce matters. For them, it was a marriage of convenience.
Okay, wow. That's three, very deep stories. If I take it to Brother Enigma, same question to you. Tell us about your divorce story. Tell us what happened.
It'll be easy to just go in and explain, this happened, this is why it happened, and that's it. But I think I won't be doing any justice by not adding any context or prefacing it with the fact that, in my late 20s, I wasn't in the same mindset or belief structure as I was, or as I am now. I think one of the big things that I found at the time was I wasn't necessarily focused, the whole concept of deen, the whole concept of, doing things the right way. Just, I think a lot of people these days can, from what I do see on social media, a lot of people can probably relate to this. I was not looking for marriage. I didn't have real intentions for marriage, but I ended up, having that thought where, I've got to start looking at this. I've got to start thinking about, the longer term future and who I want to end up with. And, I think at the time, the decisions both that I made and obviously the person I'd married made, she wasn't actually Muslim herself. But I think from the perspective I took, I just kind of, just went with it. But, as guys, we don't necessarily think about, we want to have the wedding, we want to, have the kid. We don't plan for any of this sort of stuff. It's just for us, it's just a case of like, right, we like someone, see what happens type of thing. And unfortunately, relatively with a lot of professionals that I know and subsequently work with or I'm friends with, pretty much have been in the same sort of boat in one way or another in thought process. But bringing this back to myself, really what happened was the cracks started to show over a period of time where I started looking more into Islam, more looking into, what's required of me, what I need to be doing as a Muslim. And I think that's kind of where those cracks started becoming, I guess, big crevasses.
I see. Just to clarify, so upon marriage, she hadn't reverted to Islam?
Again, that was never really an intention of mine. It wasn't anything I wasn't even too bothered about that sort of stuff at the time.
Thank you for being candid and honest there. Let me take it to Brother Mostafa then. What impact did your divorces have on you?
And let's just say that even my closest friends are asking, didn't I try hard enough to make their marriages work? Well, I replied, well, these Defi girls are very dangerous nowadays. And even my non-Muslim South Asian friends agree that getting married girls back home is not the wisest thing nowadays. One of Mum's so-called old friends even went as far to say in their own home, I wouldn't let my daughter marry you, which was shocking, downright rude and disrespectful.
Do you think you made any mistakes in your marriage or marriages?
The mistakes we made were going to Bangladesh in the first place. Even my mum's Sylheti friends were asking my mum why she got involved with this Sylheti Maulana's family.
Okay, and Mostafa, how do you bounce back from the divorces that you were a part of?
Just like my childhood trauma, resilience makes one stronger mentally. It's something you live with, you deal with, but my divorces do not bother me at all.
Okay, if I move to Brother Enigma, my friend, tell me about the impact that your divorce had on you.
Just for half of the course in terms of the actual divorce itself was pretty straightforward. Just to, I guess, tie that knot, excuse the pun, but in terms of the way you're seen, because I've never been necessarily part of the community, if that makes sense. I'm not going to go into details about it, but I'm not from a Pakistani background. And one of the things that I did find was I was amazed at how prevalent and we have to call a spade, but how much racism played a factor into the decisions other people would make. And there was a whole bunch of things in terms of, you've got ageism, you've got people that look down on you in perspective of you've been married before. And it's like, okay, those are real things that I never experienced before,
Still sticking with your previous marriage, do you think you made any mistakes in your marriage?
Look, I'm old and ugly enough to admit the fact that I'm flawed as a person. I as a man, I'm quite flawed. Sometimes I don't make decisions that are good for me. good for my health, my mental health. I've even come across this even recently where I've made a number of mistakes in terms of like how much time I give to myself. And I think from that basis, I think some of the flaws I had were quite evident going into marriage, where it's like, this is a commitment. You're not just doing a commitment for yourself, your family or her family, but also to her. And if you're going to have, and I don't have any kids, but if you are going to have kids, it's a commitment to them as well. You've got to be able-minded, willing and present. And again, we can touch upon that later down the line.
So, bro, Enigma, I got to ask you, how did you bounce back from your divorce?
I think the best way to put this, and I think this is more pertinent in this day and age, where you have so many pseudo scholars and coaches, therapists, they're pretty much, no real qualifications there, but you can call yourself one anytime you like. But I think one of the big things for me is that getting over something is something you don't do. We all have traumas. These traumas come in various guises. You can have traumas as a child, for example, and the childlike response when you're a child is absolutely perfect. You maybe hide yourself away. You don't talk about your emotions. But that doesn't work when you're an adult. When you're an adult, you do need to be vocal. You need to be upfront and honest. It's not about emotional intelligence or anything like that. I know there's loads of buzzwords for this, but I think a lot of it really comes down to is having that understanding that if you're having a bad day or if you're going through a bad time, your wife will also be going through a bad time. And I think we need to be able to reconcile that thought process before we, go into any sort of marriage. I don't think I did that at all. And I don't think the person I was with did that at all at the time. So.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll take it back to Brother Mostafa, focusing on your marriage search as a divorcee. So we're saying subsequent your divorce, that period of time. What's your marriage search been like as a divorcee?
It's been impossibly hard. Once you mention one divorce, it's hard enough. And anything beyond that is just an instant no from everyone.
Do you feel being divorced has impacted your search for marriage?
Absolutely. Almost all families do not want to know about divorcees, which goes against the sunnah.
What are the challenges you have faced in your marriage search?
I face several challenges. First of all, cultural expectations often complicate the process, as traditional values sometimes clash with modern realities. Additionally, the high standards for financial stability among potential partners created pressure, making it difficult to find common ground. And also, there is the clinical tick exercise on both sides, to be fair, but I do find most of the girls I've spoke to or met have been very demanding, to be honest.
Would you like to share any experiences in your marriage search?
Sure. I joined a website and stated my birthplace as Bangladesh and created a detailed profile mentioning my family's reputation in the South Asian and Bangladeshi communities. The family replied that they're looking for someone British born, which is ridiculous, even though I've spent the vast majority of my life in the UK. Is it any wonder why so many people aren't getting married due to narrow-mindedness? And there's also the challenge of navigating a limited matrimonial pool, particularly within the Muslim community, where preference for compatibility and shared values are crucial. Moreover, past experiences and childhood traumas sometimes influence my approach, making me more cautious about vulnerability. Balancing personal ambitions with the desire for a meaningful relationship has been a constant struggle in my marriage search. And despite these challenges, I remain optimistic about finding a partner who shares my values and vision for the future.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, hold that thought. Let me take it to Brother Enigma. Same question to you to begin with. What was your marriage search like, or is your marriage search been like as a divorcee?
Okay, so after I got married, I'll be honest with you, I left the country. I actually left my job. I left the country, wanted to get some sort of life experience or kind of, these cliche find myself and all that sort of malarkey, which really wasn't the case. I just wanted to go abroad and stay abroad for a while. I wanted to change, and I did everything I could to do that. Left my job, did everything. And I think one of the things that when I came back, and again, I can go into detail further down the line with this, is so when I came back, I never experienced, I went to an event and I didn't anticipate this sort of response, because you hear all the time, I think they call it the 3 6s or LMS, looks, money, status, 6 foot, 6 packs, 6 figures and all that sort of stuff. And, you hear about all of that sort of stuff. And You know, there's certain things you can show, other things, you know, you'd rather not show. And I thought, okay, cool. You know, this should be pretty straightforward. But one of the things I did come across was that I hadn't expected people to come in with so many criteria, yet never asked me, are they my type? You know, a barrage of questions. And, you know, it's like you go for an interview process or whatever it is. And just like at the end of it, like, yeah, this isn't something I'm interested in. But that was one part. There are other and a lot more negative experiences where I did work with a number of marriage aunties in Rishta services. I signed up for quite a lot of them because I wasn't aware of how you can actually go and find someone. You know, my modus operandi was pretty straightforward. Walk up to the girl you like, ask her out. You know, it's as simple as that. I realized actually, you know, with Muslims, you've got to be a bit more, there's a procedure you have to follow. And I found that procedure really, really difficult. But again, we'll go on to that. I think one of the big things for me was that I hadn't realized that if you'd been married before, or if you're not from the same background, no matter anything else other than, I guess, if you're a doctor.
I mean, I think you've already answered this, but I'm still going to pose it anyway. Do you feel being divorced at the time, you know, that it impacted your search for marriage?
Okay, so there's two sides to this. First part, being divorced and looking for a Muslim woman was really difficult. Being divorced and looking for a woman was really easy. I guess this is me coming back and this is me focusing, you know, I'm trying to be the best Muslim I can be. And, you know, even then, even now, I'm still trying to do better. But I guess to some degree, I hadn't anticipated the levels of, you know, questions that people will have and the, you know, the detail that you need to go into with things. So to some extent, it's been really, really difficult. But I've noticed that more so with a particular set of people. And I hadn't realized that, you know, a lot of people have this sort of mindset where if you're divorced, you can only go for divorced people. I never experienced anything like that before, and I didn't know that was actually a thing. I hope that answers your question.
No, it definitely does, and I think we'll touch upon some of the things that you've mentioned in your response to this. My next question is, what are the challenges you faced in your search for marriage? You've touched upon a few, but anything would you want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, 2024, we're almost, you know, on the horizon for 2025, and, you know, I think people have migrated to social media. You've got these apps, you've got events, everyone's going to have something to say about it, whether they have a negative connotation towards it or whether they believe it's amazing. You know, you ask someone who goes to an event and meets someone for the first time, they'll forever tell you events are the best thing since sliced bread. I'm sure you'll have that with people who've used the apps and so on and so forth. I just think you have to put yourself out there and use every sort of mode of finding someone as you can. But I think the difficulties you are going to face is that, you know, just like kind of any sort of application process for a job, you know, they want X, Y, and Z. You have to display X, Y, and Z. If you don't meet that criteria, you're immediately written off, irrespective of whether, you know, they find you attractive or you earn enough or you live locally enough. And I think those are kind of the biggest issues I faced, other than the fact that I wasn't from the same background as them. Adding on all of these additional issues, I think that's kind of what became a real problem area for me.
Okay, Enigma, if you're comfortable, would you like to share an experience in your marriage search that you can recall?
I can share so many. I think we'll have to do another episode on this. I've got one which I think is probably the best one. When I say the best one, it's also the biggest kick in the teeth I ever had in relation to the whole marriage process. I met someone via a matchmaker and they were like, this is absolutely nailed on. They were really interested in you, so on and so forth. Okay, cool. You know, did everything the way it's supposed to be done. You know, I requested any contact through her dad first. Her dad was okay with us meeting face to face, so on and so forth. We did that only a handful of times. The rest of the time we'd meet at his house, which I was perfectly comfortable with. I thought that was the best way. Anyway, long story short, getting to know each other, all good. We decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead. And they advised that I should come over with the family, did that. And he changed his mind. And the only reason why he changed his mind after agreeing, didn't tell his family, just made the decision on the fly himself, was because I think one of his friends who he had been trying to help, and I'll get onto that in a sec, but his friend's daughter was getting married to someone. And it turned out this guy had been lying about everything, you know, his job and all this sort of stuff. Now, her father said to me, well, I need you to give me your certificates. I'm going to call them up. I want your degrees. I want all of your postgraduate qualification accreditations that I've got. I want to call every one of them, and I want to come and see you at your office. I'm like, you can come and see me at my office. That's not a problem at all. But then he said, I want to come and see your desk. I said, I work on a trading floor. That's never going to happen. But again, I don't know specifically at the time what the issue was. I tried reaching out to him. Matchmaker did the same thing. His wife, his daughter, they all did the same thing. And this guy was adamant. Anyway, several months later, it turns out his friend's daughter had gone through a situation where she was getting married to someone who lied about his stuff. What actually had happened, what transpired was that the daughter had known everything about her boyfriend. And what happened in this instance was they collectively lied to the father. And because they found out that the father had been having extramarital gym sessions, I think that's the best way to put it, without going to the gym. If you know what you know. Anyway, now the girl who I was talking to, her father and this other guy had been talking, because what they had been trying to do, as good Muslims do, and there is some sarcasm there, what they had been trying to do was look at a way of concealing or removing the assets under his name so that his family would get no access to them. And that's quite literally what they had been working on doing. And it went so far as the father had gone to Pakistan and all of these sort of things to like help out and then do stuff in the UK. And, it really became a nasty thing that they were doing. But again, I was judged for, and I was told, well, you need to give all of this. I said, well, you have plenty of time to ask me this. I don't understand. What do you think I do, during office hours, during the week? How do you think I, have the house? He didn't like the fact that I had a house that was larger than his and considerably younger than him. I don't think he liked that at all. Where in fact, his wife actually mentioned the fact that he had that intimidation that I went to a better university, despite both of us more or less being raised, obviously, in two different generations within the same area and working in very similar fields, where he was supporting my area and I was actually doing the front end of what I do. I don't think he liked that very much. And I think part of that was one of the reasons why he ended up stopping the whole thing, alongside all of these other things that had been going on with his friends. But equally as much, he got her an arranged marriage several years earlier, where unfortunately that became quite violent. And when I knew about all of these sort of things, I just kind of realized that, I mean, it was a saving grace for me to imagine having a father-in-law like that. But again, it's just kind of a really horrible experience where, and we'll pick up on this, but it's a massive waste of time. Time is something, you cannot get back. So I hope that's covered everything.
Yeah, that has. I mean, that sounds like a real mess. We have a GoFundMe page to raise funds to help British Muslims find a spouse. And our platform consists of two main projects. Number one, marriage events. These are events designed and structured to assist Muslims find a spouse. And number two, our podcast, which you're listening to right now. As you know, it's called Divorce Muslims, A Second Chance. If you want to donate, please find the link to the GoFundMe page below. Okay, so I have some general questions for you, both of you brothers. I'm going to go to Brother Mostafa first. No doubt that generally speaking, Muslims are finding it difficult to get married in this day and age. Why do you think that's the case? What's the problem here?
Muslims are increasingly finding it difficult to get married due to several interconnected factors. Cultural pressures. Expectations around family background, education and career can create unrealistic standards for potential partners. Economic factors, rising living costs and financial instability can delay marriage as individuals prioritize career and financial security. Changing values, younger generations may have different views on relationships, leading to a preference for personal compatibility over traditional arrangements. Limited networks, access to potential partners can be restricted, especially in less diverse communities, making it harder to find suitable matches. Digital barriers. While online platforms are very successful, many still struggle to find trustworthy options that align with their values. These factors collectively contribute to the challenges Muslims face in navigating the marriage landscape today.
Okay, very informative. Back to you, Brother Enigma. What's your answer to this? Why do you think people are finding it difficult to get married today? What's the problem here?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say I think Brother Mostafa has hit the nail on the head. There's several, massive outcomes as to why people find themselves in the situation they're in. Cost of living crisis, definitely a big one. Cultural preferences and, parental or family expectations is also another. We can't discount the fact that we've got to pay attention to these fundamentals. Look, I come from a numbers background. I do spend time reading statistics. I actually look at the studies behind it because I understand how those studies, what these correlations mean, whether it's, if you're at the age of, if you've had an X amount of body count and the likelihood of you having, a successful marriage is, I don't want to put these statistics out there because a lot of this is already available that unfortunately a lot of trash pages do waffle on about. And I do apologize for that. But one of the things I do see is that let's get down to the bare bones of what's actually happening. I think we're very quickly becoming indoctrinated with negative speech. Everybody and their auntie and uncle, whatever you want to put it as, has a page where they can talk about whatever they want. And if, you approach them and say, hey, listen, you said something which is wrong. And even if some of these people, I've come across these Dawa babies, and I do call them babies because bring the evidence that you're a student of knowledge, confirm it, deny it. You're in fancy dress. You sit in a car, giving Dawa talks and telling people about how this, that, and so on. I think we need to start looking at where we're getting our information from. I've heard so many sisters. I know there's going to be, women tend to have what they call a tribal mindset. You attack one woman, all of them will gang up on you in the same way. And we've seen this on various social media platforms and lives and all this sort of stuff. And, I get it. Nobody wants to feel attacked. But one of the big things I see is a really negative character by a lot of people. And this is primarily down to the men. Although it's women who spend a lot of their time on social media, during the day, during the night, but the fact remains, as a man, you need to remove yourself from that situation. How many men would want to marry a woman who spends 12 to 15 hours a day on social media, sitting on lives, just sitting there? Oh, I'm learning a lot. Oh, I've had a productive day by listening to someone on social media. I just don't get that sort of, mindset. All it does is create a huge level of intolerance and fragility. And we're not necessarily learning anything. All we're doing is we're consuming, passively consuming. And as a result of that passive consumption, where it slowly erodes our own morals.
Yeah, okay. Hold that thought. I'll go to Mostafa. Mostafa, simple question for you. How important is physical attraction to you?
Of course, mutual attraction is a must to a point, but inner beauty lasts forever.
And what about you, Enigma? How important is physical attraction to you?
I'll probably get slated on social media for this, but I have to be honest, let's preface it. How do you start your car? You put your key in the ignition and turn, right? But the fact is you still have to open the door. You still have to put fuel in it, service it, all these sort of things. And everything comes in steps. Now, I think attraction is one of the first steps. And again, I will come on to this actually in terms of how important attraction is. I think I hear lots of people saying the same thing over and over again. It's kind of like a well-versed line that people use is that I'm looking for someone who's kind, who's caring, who's humble and on their deen, and it's going to help me complete part of my deen. Yeah, that's great. But I know plenty of guys that will do all of that for you. It's just that some of them haven't hit 6 foot. Other ones who haven't hit 6 figures. Some of them are supporting their families or unable to move out, those people they won't get a look in. And I think for me personally, looks is important. If I'm not attracted to you, I'm sorry, but I don't have female friends. It's just never going to work. I think looks is absolutely integral initially, but then the next step after looks, and yes, people are going to say looks are going to fade and so on and so forth. Well, then go for a really attractive woman, because when her looks do fade, she'll just be attractive. Hopefully that should silence those critics. But in reality, the first step, yes, it will be looks. After that, you need to find out what their character is like. Are they on their deen? What do they believe about Islam? How do they want to involve Islam into their lives, which is a way of life for us. But there are 4 areas I believe we can marry on, their deen, their looks, their family, and you'll have to remind me of the last one.
Status,
exactly. Hope that answered it.
It does answer the question, yes. And that brings me nicely to my next question, starting off with brother Mostafa. And Mostafa, these days, many women want financial stability in a man. Not criticizing them, but that seems to be the case. But on the other end of the spectrum, from a brother's point of view, the cost of living is extremely high. The average salary in the UK being around 28 to 30k. And statistically, most people in the UK live paycheck to paycheck. So there seems to be a clash here. What's your view on this?
Well, the clash between women's desire for financial stability and the economic realities faced by many men highlights significant societal challenges. Expectations versus reality. Women obviously do seek financial security, it's their right. But many men struggle to meet these expectations due to stagnant wages and economic pressures. Impact of economic conditions, with average salaries in the UK around 28 to 30k, and many living paycheck to paycheck, achieving financial stability is increasingly difficult, if not impossible for a family, adding stress for men in traditional provider roles. 70k isn't a lot now in real terms, and a £100,000 salary doesn't make anyone wealthy anymore when everyone looks at the overall tax burden. But for this reason, I would advocate on relocating to a true Muslim country where there is ideally zero or very low income tax, where there is incentive to make money. Or if that's not possible, to another country which offers similar opportunities. Changing dynamics. Conversations around relationships need to evolve, emphasizing that financial stability can be built over time rather than being a prerequisite for marriage. Open communication. Mutual understanding and open discussions about financial goals can help bridge the gap, leading to more realistic expectations and a collaborative approach to financial stability. If the wife is willing to contribute to household finances, then she will receive her reward.
Okay. And over to you, brother Enigma. Same question. We've got this clash of women's criteria of financial stability in a man versus a man's scenario of living paycheck to paycheck and cost of living and the average salary and, and this clash. What's your view on this?
I like to keep things pretty simple. I wanted to buy a Ferrari and, I can go to the shop, I can go to the forecourt and ask, hey, listen, I want to buy this, but I've only got this amount and I've fallen quite a way short. Now, realistically speaking, at some stage, you're going to be like, well, I'm asking for something that I cannot afford. So I'm not saying marriage is, people selling or any of that sort of stuff, but just as an analogy, they can either accept or turn me away. That's it. I just need to, as a man, I need to be, well, these are my limitations. I need to be very clear and open about what my expectations are. And I know women get a lot of heat on social media for telling people that they have high criteria and so on. I think, if I'm blessed enough, inshallah, one day, if I'm blessed enough to have a daughter and she decides to turn around and say, I met her and it's going to be, £1 million or whatever. I think there was £1 million meher paid last year by some person in London. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I remember that.
But the fact is, that's down to them. If you as a woman, for example, want to have a high meher because you have your reasons behind wanting your high meher, that's down to you. Absolutely go for it. There's nothing wrong with you doing that. But do not complain if you cannot find a man who meets that criteria. Do not follow a lot of these women with really poor character who come on and admonish men because they had an arranged marriage, it didn't work out, now it's really difficult for them. Don't follow those people. Don't listen to that sort of negativity. You have a high criteria, that's down to you. But as a guy, we cannot be going to women and saying, hey, listen, reduce your criteria. And I believe there is, and you'll have to correct me here, but I believe that there is a hadith on this where a woman who, to ease her or potential husband's burden, she'll reduce her meher. Or, I think good on you for that, but that should not be a prerequisite or an expectation for a man going into it. I don't believe any man should be questioning a woman's meher. He needs to just go in and say, hey, listen, this is how much I earn. It does mean that I'm not going to be able to buy a house for you next to your parents and X, Y, and Z unless you help contribute. Now, again, that's a discussion they can have, but I do not believe a guy should complain about something like that because and equally, I don't think women should complain if they can't find guys who are at that stage. Well, the fact is, we find ourselves at a place where, okay, who's going to blink first? It's either the guy is going to back down and decide, right, this isn't the right one for him. Or the woman who's at the situation where she's like, I do want to get married, and for various reasons, which again, we don't need to go into, but she can decide to lower her meher. But a guy should not be going in with the expectation, I'm going to speak to you and I'm going to try to convince you to lower your meher. I think that's the absolute wrong way of doing this. I hope that answers it.
It does answer it, and it brings me on to you've already mentioned it before I've mentioned it, the buzzword mahr, and I'll go to Mostafa first. So Mostafa, as you know, these days, there appears to be many women who want high mahr amounts. Again, I'm not criticizing them. It is their right to ask for whatever they want. But what's your take on that from a brother's point of view?
Well, this trend of higher mahr amounts can be seen from various perspectives. Cultural significances. This reflects respect and commitment, symbolizing the groom's seriousness. So, for example, if the sister's asking for £20,000 and the brother is happy to oblige, so be it. But it seems that a lot of sisters are asking for a year's salary in advance, which is not doable for most men. Financial security. This offers women a form of protection or security, especially in case of divorce. Social pressures. Societal norms may inflate expectations, leading to higher demands. So it's basically a competition. So if a sister has received X amount, then another sister should be demanding the same amount. Potential barriers. High mahr can create financial obstacles, making marriage more difficult. Balance and communication. Open discussions between partners can help align mahr with the values and financial reality. Now, finding balance is key to maintaining the true spirit of the marriage.
Okay, and over to you, Enigma. What's your opinion on the high mahr amounts these days?
Okay, so in terms of meher, I think a lot of people are hugely influenced by social media. We ourselves, we see it all day, every day. It's the subliminal conditioning that we go through. The little advert, you'll see a little misdirection here or there. And then, by the end of the week, you want that family-sized portion of, fried chicken that you didn't even know you wanted. It's just that you've been sitting on the tube and they've had their advert on there, each time you've come on. You've just subconsciously made a decision without actually making that decision. This is amazing brand tactics that companies use. Now, how this falls into, I guess, what we're talking about in meher and how people's expectations have changed. Well, actually, a lot of it is driven in the same sort of mode. People are saying things to you. You're subconsciously listening to, when women tell women that all men are bad, what they're not telling you is that they've likely, I think the statistic is 50% of British Muslims haven't had an arranged marriage. Now, when you think about it, people are not necessarily going to come out and say, well, my dad got me an arranged marriage when I was 15. I was supposed to be in college, but instead I was on the farm milking donkeys or goats, whatever you milk. Shows my knowledge there. But that's essentially what they were doing. And they won't tell you the fact that their dad got them to go to Pakistan and get married, that their mum accepted it, that their brothers accepted it, their uncles accepted it. And when they got married to their cousin and came back to the UK and did not have the life that they expected, they ultimately got divorced, and they had a really bad experience. And I really sympathize for any woman who's gone through this. I do hope they write into, maybe come onto your panel at one point to discuss what they've gone through, and their daughter should go through this. But there are women out there who go and tell everyone all men are this, but they won't say, actually, this is limited to my parents, or this is limited to my family. Nobody wants to say that sort of stuff, and I notice a lot of people don't do that. But what they will do is they'll tell you everything. It's like they channel their frustration to everyone else, and whoever's in their way, any guy that's in their way, will be bearing the brunt of what they get, of what they've gone through. And I think this sort of conditioning is why when you see women who've got divorced and they say, make sure you put on your nikah contract that you take away one of his rights. Don't let him marry another wife. Make sure you do this, make sure you do that. I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, I get it. You're trying to influence younger women to protect them. I get that. But at what cost, though? And I think this is where we're now getting people who are having, they've all got the same sort of criteria. They've all got the same sort of agenda. They've all got the same sort of likes and dislikes. And you realize we've just homogenized anger, and people flock to negativity rather than anything positive. They're not looking at, what our parents' generation, and they did live a different life compared to us, way tougher than what we've actually realized. Coming to this country when it was the way it was before, I don't think people fully understand how it actually is. So I hope that kind of roundabout way answers your question.
It does. Okay. All right. So my next question to you, brother Mostafa, is on the whole concept of polygamy. Please provide your views on polygamy in light of today.
Well, polygyny in Islam, to be more accurate, is permitted under specific conditions, but requires careful adherence to justice and fairness. The Quranic basis states that in Surah Al-Nisa, men are allowed to marry up to 4 wives if they can treat them all justly. Justice and fairness, equal treatment in financial support, time and emotional care is mandatory. Societal context, historically practiced for social reasons, such as providing family support after wars. Consent, this is required from all parties, including the first wife, and this is essential. Contemporary views, modern scholars stress emotional well-being and stability, advocating careful consideration. It's worth noting that there are around 20,000 polygynous marriages in the UK, according to the 2014 Channel 4 documentary The Men with Many Wives. Legal challenges, polygyny is restricted or prohibited in many legal systems, complicating its practice. Ultimately, fairness, consent, and moral responsibility are crucial.
That's definitely an interesting stat that you put out there. And I'll go over to Enigma. Now, Enigma, bro, me and you are no strangers to this polygamy or polygyny debate. What's your view on this?
Well, I think polygyny is allowed in Islam, so I don't disagree with it. Whether I want to do that, that's a different question. Now, I know lots of people talk about Islam being personal to them. Well, as a personal choice myself, it's not something I foresee as something me wanting right now. But then again, what I wanted when I was 20 is quite different to what I want now. So again, you just never know in that sort of context. But I think one thing we have to do is not discount the fact that there is Islamic precedence for polygyny. I'd probably make a better argument than a lot of the women do on social media in relation to what about finding your first wife and all that sort of stuff. But let's just add some intelligence to it. If my question, and unfortunately a lot of these dawah babies and scholars for dollars keep avoiding me on, is that if, let's just say, person A will call them Kazim and Lady B will call her Lady B. Now, Kazim and Lady B, they get married and he's on, let's just keep it simple, 25k a year. Now, he decides several years later to get a second wife. His first wife was getting 25k a year worth of his salary, but now he's having to split that. So he's taking from one wife to give another. Or should it be when he gets to maybe 50k, that's when he can start affording the second wife, because what is equal with an equal measure? I think that's how it should be. But again, there's way smarter people out there than me who can probably answer that question. But I think from a woman's perspective, I think that's a fair argument for her to make, rather than put things down and take away man's, Islamic rights in a nikah contract, because he could equally turn around and say, well, if you don't give me 3 kids and, or if you don't give me a son, or all of these sort of, and it becomes just tit for tat. So I just think maybe polygyny, we can't disagree with, just like we can't disagree with praying 5 times a day. We can't disagree with the hijab. There's a lot of things that we can't disagree with. And I think we have to understand that the liberalization of Islam, because of social media, you have uneducated people making uneducated statements about Islam. I think we really have to go back to what Islam actually says, and we have to go through authentic people, people who are learned within the subject. The reason why we go to scholars is for the fact that a scholar is equivalent of a doctorate in the study or an understanding of Islam and its jurisprudence. So I think that's where we should maybe make the first start, rather than, saying we follow the Quran, we follow the Sunnah, and we're going to reject everyone else. We're just going to do our own interpretation of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Brother Mostafa, over to you. Who is more to blame when it comes to people not being able to find a spouse, men or women?
Blame for difficulties in finding a spouse cannot be placed solely on men or women, as challenges often stem from both sides. Men may struggle with unrealistic expectations, communication, or financial pressures, while women might have high standards, safety concerns, or career priorities. Shared issues like cultural norms, the impact of online matrimony, and emotional readiness affect both genders, making the solution more about mutual understanding and compromise rather than assigning blame.
Okay. What about you, Enigma? Who's more to blame here in, the whole scenario of finding it difficult to find a spouse, men or women?
Well, a man is supposed to lead. So I would say for any father who's raised a daughter that sits on the internet for more than 2 hours a day, I would say maybe there's a real big question that needs to be put on what he has taught her and what sort of morals she has, firstly. So from that perspective, she's only a product of the environment, her family, her whatever you want to put it, her parents have set. She's just representing what they've taught her to be. And there's an element of the culture and community that she's found on social media that's done this. But again, this is always going to be levied towards men. But I can tell you, as just a slight addition or pivot towards this, is that I think these these people who call themselves, these love doctors, these coaches, these therapists, and, at the end of the day, you just need to do a £30 course online and you can call yourself that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues we have right now is people who have no real knowledge. I say I don't have a lot of life experience, but then again, I moved out of home when I was 19. I lived in a couple of different countries. I lived in different towns. I left home and that sort of stuff. I've traveled a lot. And I still believe I don't have a lot of life experience compared to that, even 15 different companies I worked at. But I still feel as though I don't have that much life experience compared to some of the people I've worked with and so on. But yet there's people there who pretty much, they've had, one arranged marriage, it didn't work out, and, they live on the internet now, and that qualifies them to have all that experience. And I think this is where you find the problem is you've got the original, the fathers who've raised very weak-minded people, and you've got people with very weak characters, bad characters in to some degree, who are influencing people kind of like the blind leading the blind now. That's where you put your blame.
Okay. And I'll move on to the last couple of questions, but I'll combine it into one question. So we're talking about solutions and advice. So starting off with Mostafa, what do you think the solutions are to the problem or the difficulties in finding a spouse, and what advice would you give to the people who are looking for marriage today?
To address the difficulties in finding a spouse, solutions include encouraging open communication, creating supportive community environments, using secure online platforms that have mandatory ID checks, offering education on relationship skills, promoting personal development, adjusting expectations, fostering a cultural shift towards valuing emotional connection, and establishing pre- and post-marital coaching programs, which would also be beneficial. For those brothers and sisters seeking marriage, know yourself, be open-minded, prioritize compatibility, communicate clearly, invest in personal growth, seek support from family and community, use trusted platforms, start searching early, be patient and stay positive. These strategies can improve the chances of finding a suitable partner.
Okay, and over to you, brother Enigma, talking of solutions and advice.
I don't give advice, I can only make suggestions, and it's down to someone if they're adult enough to make an educated choice. I would say in this instance, don't ever believe someone who starts a conversation or says something with, I feel like, or if anyone says, or they say, I'm going to do. The fact is, it's all about what's, the proof is in the pudding. It's all about action. Words are just words. They're empty promises. The only words we believe are that of our maker, and that's it. We have authentic hadith. We have a Quran, which give us a guide in terms of how we live our lives. When it comes down to it, we have to tie that camel. Now, what does tying the camel look like? Well, it certainly doesn't mean sitting on social media. It certainly doesn't mean avoiding events. It certainly doesn't mean, procrastinating. We need to be taking action. The best way to take action is really simple. It's about the law of probability. Marriage events tend to have between 5 to 7% success rate. Marriage apps usually range between 3 and 5% success rate. You've got matchmakers who I believe between 2 and 10% success rate. And I think all of them individually are really poor ways of finding someone. You have to go through all of them, whether it's on social media, whether it's through whatever channels it is, but you have to be actively looking and be open and honest about what you're actually looking for. Don't give people the answer they want to hear. I could have come on today and tell everyone what they wanted to hear, so I look good or whatever. I'm not here to impress anyone. I've got experiences and what I've gone through and what I've had to deal with. And I've seen thousands of profiles because I've helped matchmakers set up their databases because I signed up and I thought they were pretty trash in terms of how they managed things. If they remembered you, they'd find you a match. If they didn't, then, after 2 weeks, you're just pretty much another profile I've helped set up, but obviously I'm going to be looking at these profiles. And one thing I did see over in abundance was the fact that people would have such high criteria. And I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what is it I can bring to the person I want to marry? And what would they expect in me? And if you can start asking real questions, none of this 2 a.m. pillow talk or anything like that. Do things properly, do things halal, And one thing I would say is 100% of the time, I would debate anyone on this. 100% of the time, if they do not include your mahram, or if she does not include her mahram, then they are looking for something other than marriage. And whether that ruins people's situations they're going through, I'm not too bothered about, because at the end of the day, it's down to, you're doing things for your akhirah. We're not living for just this life, and you really have to pay attention to that. So that's all I can give.
Okay, well done. Over to you, brother Enigma. I mean, you're no stranger to rapid fire rounds. So you ready for this, bro?
Always.
Okay, a woman who's very attractive with low level deen, or a woman who you don't find attractive but has high level of deen?
Attractive and no deen, because I can teach her.
Marrying a woman from UK or marrying a woman from outside of UK?
UK.
After marriage, living with family or living independently?
Independent.
Looks or character?
Character, but she'd have to be open to polygyny.
A woman who you find physically very attractive, who wants 100k mahr, or a woman who you don't find attractive, who wants 1k mahr?
Same answer as before. She'll have to go into polygyny.
Okay. Educated woman or attractive woman?
Attractive woman. I bring the education.
One thing you really want, but you could compromise on for the right person?
I really want to have, build on that relationship. I think we discount the fact that the importance of, a lot of people talk about having their best friend and all that sort of stuff. Well, that takes time. And the fact is, I'm willing to focus. I want to focus on that, but I'm willing to forego a period of time where, I'd want to spend a couple of years before even having kids. And I think sometimes you have to be a little bit more realistic about it and realize that, maybe it might be a bit more important to her to have kids. And that's probably what I would forego, is that kind of initial part of that relationship.
Okay. One regret in life?
This is easy. Not finding out about Islam the way it should have been. Not seeking knowledge early enough.
Biggest achievement to date?
Alhamdulillah for this is one I can only give to our Creator. By the grace of our Creator, is being able to support the people I love.
And biggest dream?
Biggest dream, genuinely the biggest dream would be for Palestine to be free. And I think if more people followed the letter of their religions, irrespective of what denomination you follow, we'd actually have a much better world.
Okay. And Mostafa, next thing to do is the rapid fire round. You ready for the rapid fire round, Mostafa?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So a woman who is very attractive with low level of deen, or a woman who you don't find attractive but has a high level of deen?
Sister who is less attractive with high deen.
Marrying a woman from the UK or marrying a woman from outside of the UK?
From the UK.
After marriage, living with family or living independently?
In my circumstance, it would be living with family.
Looks or character?
Character.
A woman who you find physically very attractive who wants 100k mahr, or a woman who you don't find attractive who wants 1k mahr?
A woman who isn't that attractive but who wants a lower mahr.
Educated woman or attractive woman?
Educated woman.
One thing you really want but you could compromise on for the right person?
I value a strong emotional connection but could compromise on hobbies if the person shares core values and mutual respect.
One regret in life?
Not having a support system during my childhood trauma.
Biggest achievement to date?
Founding MMS.
And your biggest dream?
My biggest dream is to make MMS the leading platform for fostering secure, meaningful connections while supporting global communities through social impact initiatives.
Okay, Mostafa, what we'll do is we'll do your profile. You ready for your profile, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so let's focus on yourself first. Okay, Mostafa, what is your age?
49.
What's your height?
5'4".
Your location?
Liverpool.
Ethnicity?
Bangladeshi.
Occupation?
Foundation Chartered Manager and Certified Social Entrepreneur.
Okay, in terms of what you're looking for, what's the age range you are looking for?
35 to 45.
What is your height preference?
5 foot to 5'5".
Your location preference?
Anywhere in Britain.
Ethnicity preference?
First choice would be a Bengali girl from Bangladesh or West Bengal, India, but any South Asian girl is fine. I'm also open to reverts as well.
Occupation preference?
Ideally from a medical background, but any occupation is fine.
Okay, apart from what we've already mentioned, in summary, what are you looking for?
Somebody who shares the same values as I do and is willing, if they're from a different background from me, then they're willing to understand and learn our culture.
Okay, that's the end of your profile. So, brothers, thank you for joining this episode. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoyed being part of this podcast.
Thank you.
If you fit the criteria of the guest today, and if you are interested in considering the guest for marriage, then please email us the following details: your name, age, location, height, occupation, ethnicity, marital status, family contact name, and details. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com. Remember the golden rule: only family details will be exchanged. If we have no family details, then the request will be ignored. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, then please email us at divorcedmuslims@gmail.com. We have a GoFundMe page to raise funds to help British Muslims find a spouse, and our platform consists of two main projects. Number one, marriage events. These are events designed and structured to assist Muslims find a spouse. And number two, our podcast, which you're listening to right now. As you know, it's called Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance. If you want to donate, please find the link to the GoFundMe page below.